Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 394 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I cannot be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today we are going to be talking about infidelity, and specifically financial infidelity. And the impacts that, such financial cheating on your partner can have on your financial life, and the ultimate importance of working with your spouse to be the best with your personal finances that you can be. Because two minds are better than one, two brains, two thought processes, two different worldviews can be helpful in making the best financial sense of things possible. And then ultimately, if you're going to stay with somebody, if you're going to have money with them over the long term, it's very important that you learn how to work together. And so we'll talk about all that and more in today's episode, so stick around for that. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. Now, how many of you have ever done something that your spouse didn't know about, right? How many of you have ever, gone and bought something that your spouse didn't know about? How many of you have ever, gone and put money on a credit card or taken out a loan or taken out any type of debt that your spouse didn't know about, right? And ultimately, I'm not saying that surprising a spouse would be a wrong thing to do. I'm not suggesting that little things are going to kill your marriage. But what I am suggesting is that doing the right thing and working with your spouse financially is the way that you should always go. So if you have done anything, monetarily that your spouse wouldn't approve of, or that you've kept a secret because you're ashamed of that thing, then you aren't alone. More than 30% of Americans admit that they've committed some form of financial infidelity, according to an online survey of more than 2,000 adults conducted for creditcards.com. A lot of times, what this goes back to is communication or a lack thereof. It can really undermine the trust if you are keeping secrets, right? So they say that at the root of this is the fact that spouses are not communicating. They're not talking to one another about their money. And if you guys go back, and I don't suggest that you watch it because it's not very good, but if you go back to the very first episode I did of this show, it was all about talking about money, right? And part of it was talking about money with your spouse. Talking about money with your spouse is an extremely big thing. Communicating with your spouse about your money. And when I say your money, I'm not talking about just you, but you and your spouse's money, right? It is both of your money. Every single dollar of income that is brought into your household, if you are married, is both of your monies. Now, if you're not married and you're just living with somebody and you're trying to work things out financially with them, then you're running uphill. And the reason that I say that is because that person has no reason to do everything that you want them to do, right? There's no legally binding thing going on there, right? They make their decisions, you make yours. You may live together, but ultimately there's no legal liability going on for their debts, your debts, whatever, right? But if you are married, you should be doing your finances together. You should be making financial decisions together, and you should be communicating with one another, because again, this lack of communication is what is ultimately causing more than 30% of Americans committing some form of financial infidelity. Now, in fact, more than half of adults surveyed said that financial cheating is just as bad or worse than physical cheating. And I think we do all believe this, but we believe it to varying degrees, right? Some of us believe that, just, going out and doing something small that your spouse didn't know, and something that may be 100% insignificant, is not necessarily a bad thing, or something you didn't budget for, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the bigger that things get, the more substantial that things get, the more hiding and secret keeping that is done, then the worse that it is. But ultimately, right? Ultimately, we need to be talking about our spouses, about how we spend our money, and ultimately how we are going to run our financial lives. Now, it's hard enough to meet your financial goals when you are working together. If one person is siphoning off money or doing their own thing, it just makes it that much harder, right? Think about how hard it is to, save up a down payment for a house. Think about how hard it is to invest money over a long period of time in large amounts in order to retire properly. Think about how hard it is to, work hard and get that raise and all those types of things. And to do all that and to just have your spouse, pour money down the drain that you didn't know about, that can be emotionally damaging, and that can damage your relationship as well as damage your financial situation. And ultimately, that's not what you want. Now, Americans admitted to the following forms of financial infidelity. So 15% said that they spent more than their partner or their spouse would be okay with, right? So they said that they were overspending, which is not surprising that this would be here. A lot of that, my guess, would have to do with the fact that there weren't good boundaries set up in the first place, right? They didn't budget properly in the first place. They didn't do the things they were supposed to do to make sure that everybody understood how much you were supposed to spend. And so they just think that, hey, their spouse wouldn't be okay with the amount of money that they spent. Then 9% held secret debt. This is a big problem, right? Because your debts are going to ultimately be left to your spouse. Your spouse is going to have to pay your debts. And the last thing that they want is to have to, find out beyond the grave that you had a debt that they didn't know about, right? And I mean, just any type of debt, whether it's a loan, whether it's a credit card, whether it's whatever, right? Keeping a debt from your spouse is just, it can be so detrimental. And I know that there are debts that you may have taken on that are embarrassing, that may not be things that you're particularly proud of. But on the other hand, the longer that you keep those debts from your spouse, it's not getting any better, right? To think that you can just work it out on your own and ultimately figure things out and they'll never know. How rarely does that work out the way that you want it to? It rarely does, right? Ultimately, the truth sets us free. So being truthful with your spouse, telling them what you ultimately have and then attacking it together is the best option. But 9% said they hold secret debt. Another 9% say that they have a secret credit card, right? And this is very interesting. And this goes back to the trust argument, right? Do you trust your spouse, right? Do you think that your spouse trusts you? And my guess is if you have a secret credit card, you don't think that your spouse trusts you to spend money in the way that you should, and or, right, you aren't trustworthy to spend money in the way that you should. And so you went out and got a secret credit card in order to spend money however the heck you wanted to, which again is not the right way. And then that continues on to the next thing that people admitted to doing. 8% said that they had a secret checking account. Another 8% said that they had a secret savings account. And all this goes back to, do you trust your spouse, and should your spouse trust you? If you have any of these things, then it's because you're not trustworthy with money in the first place, and you're ashamed likely of what you are doing with that money. And it can be any number of things. From the, most benign to the most malignant, but, nonetheless, all of these things are bad signs to the financial health of your marriage. And so I don't think it should be something that, that we're having to deal with. This should not be something that we partake in. We should not be doing these things. Now, again, if you are not married, if you just live with your partner or whatever, then guess what? Nothing really matters here, because you're not obligated to say or do any of these things with them. Now, look, if you are doing the thing that I, advise against, which is, having accounts together and budgeting together and working financially together, which I don't think is the right thing. But if you are, then any type of secrecy is going to be damaging to a relationship. And so I would just advise against it. Now, let's talk about why partners have money secrets. So there are a number of reasons why adults are dishonest about their finances with their partners. The most common culprit, about 1/3, never felt the need to share their finances. Just never felt the need. Just never felt like it was important to share their finances. And I think that's kind of a cop-out. I think that we all know that our finances are important and that they can make a big impact on our relationship. So I don't 100% believe that. But for some, maybe they just don't recognize that it's actually financial infidelity. Maybe they don't realize that they're doing anything wrong and that they're just, going about their life. But here's my problem with that argument. Not knowing that it was financial infidelity, not knowing that it's the wrong thing to do. If you knew it was the right thing to do, then you wouldn't have any trouble telling your spouse or your partner that you had any of those extra accounts or those extra credit cards or those other debts, right? There's got to be some underlying shame or some underlying something that's keeping you from telling them these things, right? Anytime we keep a secret, there's a reason, right? There's a reason that we don't want somebody to find out. But it all depends on the relationship and what the rules are that the couple have set for themselves. And unfortunately, because money is so taboo, most couples don't really know how to talk about it very well, and they aren't intentional about those rules, right? They aren't intentional about keeping the rules that they've set for themselves because money is such a taboo subject. But again, if you have a partner, right? If you have somebody that is just your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, then yeah, you ultimately should talk about money if things are getting more and more serious, but you don't need to be managing your money with that person. You don't need to be beholden to that person to tell them everything about your financial life unless you want to, right? But if you are married, then I don't care how taboo money is. I don't care how ashamed you are of your financial situation. I don't care where you think you're at or where you want to be versus where you are. You have to talk about it. You have to be transparent. You have to be an open book, because failing to do so is going to cost you more than just money, right? Failing to do so is going to cause you pain. It's going to cause you anxiety. It's going to cause you to not have a healthy relationship with your spouse. And that is the last thing that we want. Now, another 30% of people said that they have the desire to control their own finances or maintain privacy around money. And 25% said they were embarrassed about the way that they handle money. There you go, right? 25% embarrassed, right? I don't care if you're embarrassed, right? I don't care, right? Then don't get into a legally binding contract with somebody else by being married, right? Because this is only going to create financial liability on both sides, right? Don't be embarrassed. Or at least if you are embarrassed, just be transparent, tell them, right? And you might be surprised. They may also be in that 25% that are embarrassed, right? And then this idea of, 30% saying they have the desire to control their own finances or privacy, then don't be married, right? Don't be married if you just have this desire to do your own thing, right? I don't know what the benefit of being married is if you can't have two people working toward a common goal. Because again, two people working toward a common goal is extremely, extremely powerful. Now, there were fewer adults who had different reasons for keeping a financial secret. 14% said that they didn't trust their partner with money. So it goes back to that trust idea. Another 14% had a secret stash in case that the relationship ended poorly. I was thinking about this earlier. I didn't say it, but I've seen this happen before. I've seen somebody, stash away money secretly. That way, when and if things were to end, and in that case, things definitely did end. Then you see that, there was no trust. There was a problem, right? The secrecy or infidelity may have gone further than just the finances. Now, for 13%, the extra money was being used to support an addiction. Now, this is something that I did not and have not touched on, but is probably far more prevalent than we would like to believe, right? Whether your addiction is something as simple as, and I say simple, that doesn't make it easy to kick, but whether your addiction is something as simple as food, or something as, as something as addictive and, difficult to kick as, pornography or tobacco or whatever, right? Ultimately, we need to make sure that, again, we're open with it. I know it's hard to be open with your spouse. I know it's hard to tell them what's on your mind. I know it's hard to be an open book and to provide clarity and to tell the truth. It's hard to tell the truth sometimes about things that are not comfortable, right? That are things that we ourselves are ashamed of. But ultimately, it's going to be better for us. It's going to be better for our money. And we see that this shame and this, lack of trust is what is leading people to bad financial decisions over time. So how do you navigate financial infidelity? The first thing that we have to do is address the emotions that come up for each person and work to help them to regulate their feelings, because the first thing that's going to come up is not a logical financial thing. It's going to be something that is emotional and that is likely hurtful. For many people, hiding money or debt may be due to shame around finances or because they've gone through a bad breakup or divorce and feel safer having a savings account of their own. These emotions need to be addressed to move forward. Now, I just want to pause right there because there's something that was key there that I think is important to hit on. They brought up divorce or bad breakup. So we'll talk about divorce because, like I said, boyfriend, girlfriend, well, I'm not worried about you working on your finances together. But if you have a spouse, you should. You have to understand that certain people have been through some horrendous things. Certain people have been through things that, you would have never understood, and you don't understand why it makes them feel or act the way that they do. Okay. Some people have been through divorces that are extremely costly, right? Some people have had to deal with, having to sell a lot of their assets just in order to give half to their spouse, as their spouse divorces them. Now, this is a big problem, but as those people find new people that they love and that they care for and they want to marry or whatever, you have to understand that there's going to be a bit of, separation there. There's going to be a bit of anxiety and a bit of nervousness about jumping back into, connecting your finances with someone else's, because maybe the person that you were with and you loved and that you were married to for a long time, really, took you to the cleaners in the divorce, right? That type of thing can absolutely happen. And so this may be a situation where a prenup is necessary. This may be a situation where it's okay that you have, some of your own accounts, but those own accounts should be visible and available to both parties. And you should talk about money. Look, the more tender a subject is, then the more you should talk about it, the more you should address it. I know it hurts. I know it's not going to be fun for a while, but it will allow you to heal better. I mean, I just think about this metaphor. You think about people who get really bad burns, right? They get really bad burns and then they have to have the scabs pulled and the excess skin pulled off and all these types of things, right? Just so what? Just so they can heal properly. And so a lot of times in our finances, we have to pull that excess skin off. We have to get those scabs taken off, and it's going to be painful and it's going to hurt and it's going to, lead to a lot of tears and maybe a lot of anger, but it's also going to lead to healing. And that's what we want in our financial lives, is to be healed from these, financial infidelity practices that we may take on. Now, money is always emotional and you just can't separate it, right? Once we have the emotions down, we can make a plan and we can follow through on that. But if you don't have the emotions down, if you don't know how you feel about things, then how you act is not going to be clear either, right? Financial infidelity is definitely different than financial abuse, though, which is generally when money is being used to manipulate or control someone in a relationship, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about abusing someone financially. We're talking about keeping something from someone else, doing something that someone else doesn't know about, and that is not going to be good for them over a long period of time. Now, most adults in committed relationships, either married or in civil partnership or living together, again, only being married should be the only time that we work on our finances together. But most adults keep some of their finances separate. Again, if you're married, I don't agree with this. If you're not married, everything should be separate. Now, more than half of couples keep at least some separate financial accounts, while 34% mix joint and separate accounts. Only 23% keep everything completely separated according to the survey, which is still quite a lot. But if we're talking about people who are in civil partnerships or living together as well, then that very well might be them. Now, younger couples and those from lower income households making less than $50,000 annually are more likely to keep some or all their money in individual accounts as opposed to having joint ones. Why? Lack of trust, not being good with money themselves, being ashamed with what they've done with money, all those types of things. Middle income households are more likely to pool all assets, and the highest earners often opt for a blended approach of some combined and some individual accounts. Look, I don't think it's right to have separate accounts. I don't think that's a smart thing to do. I will say this, you can use separate accounts as a strategy, but even still, I think it should be open, transparent, and available to both spouses, okay? So I think that something you could do is just have a checking account that is for your own discretionary spending, right? To make sure that you don't overspend discretionarily. But this needs to be a part of a larger budget, right? It needs to be a part of a household budget and have an automatic transfer of the amount into those specific accounts. But I don't know about you guys, but I know that with my banking, I can go online and all of the accounts that I have with that bank are all right there, right? So that should still be the case if we do this. We shouldn't have an account at a different bank or an account that somebody doesn't know about. No, the account should be within the set of, savings checking accounts that you have. And then, you can put money into those and spend money out of those based on that being your allocation for discretionary spending. Other than that, there should be nothing of the like. I don't like the whole idea of people saying, we keep the bills here and then we have separate accounts and they don't know about mine and I don't know about theirs. And, that's just whatever we want to do. That's only going to lead to financial infidelity. That's only going to lead to you doing something that your spouse doesn't agree with. Because otherwise, why would you want to keep it from them? Otherwise, why would you not have it open and transparent? That's why I don't even see a big need for, putting the discretionary spending in separate accounts, because couldn't you just have it in one account, right? And then just trust that your spouse is going to do the right thing and you're going to do the right thing. And if work out of one account, that's what my wife and I do. I don't see why that would be necessary. So I don't think that having separate is ever good. The only situation where it's 100% necessary for a financial account to be separate is when you have, like, let's say a 401k or an IRA or something like that, some type of investment account that is an individual account. But even so, your spouse should have full access to that as well. But any other investment accounts that can be joint should be joint, right? Now, solutions for, these financial infidelity problems are generally just up to what's best for the couple. But what is best for couples that are married is to put your finances together, work together on your finances, two people, common goal. What's best for those who are not married is to not work together, to not have one budget, to not have two people going towards a common goal. You have two different goals until you are married. Now, details can work out different for every couple and situation, but what is important is that everyone is on the same page about what money is coming in, what's going to shared expenses, and what is allocated towards your spending, right? Once a plan is established, regular check-ins and communication are still necessary. And this is 100% why. The first thing that I tell you guys to do in the financial action plan is what? Is to have a unique monthly budget. And I tell you, your budget should be you working together with your spouse, making sure that you all are on the same page. You know where your income's coming from. You know how much is coming in. You know how much is going out. You know how much you have to spend discretionarily. You know these things. That way, there is no lack of communication. There is no lack of trust. You are on the same page, and you can work through things together. And within that budget meeting, it doesn't just have to be about the budget, right? If you've had a debt that you've been ashamed about, then you can talk to your spouse about that. Tell them about that debt. Put it on the table. Make it something that you're going to work through together, right? And it should be, in the first place, put out on the table as something you work through together. But it's so, I know it's uncomfortable, right? It's not comfortable. Emotional things are not comfortable to sit down and talk about all the time. And especially when you feel like this is something that, no, everybody else has it figured out. No, they don't, right? People do not have their financial lives figured out, right? I still learn new things every day, right? But not working with your spouse is just not an option. It's not the thing that we should be doing. You can avoid a ton of trouble if you're just open and honest and you talk regularly, right? If you keep something from the beginning and then you ultimately let it out later, there's going to be some pain associated with letting it out later. So the earlier you can put everything out on the table, the better, right? The more clear you can be about everything that you have and everything that may be an issue, the better, right? I mean, it's just like, regular physical infidelity, right? It's uncomfortable to talk about, right? It's difficult for people to fess up that they actually did something wrong. And it's very much the same with your finances. And it's going to be hard to rebuild trust once your spouse knows that you have done something in this way. But once you do put together some good faith and try to work together with your spouse, things will get better. But it just may take time, and it may take this long process of rebuilding trust and rebuilding that financial strength that you have in your household. But I want every single one of you to win, and I want you to have healthy marriages and healthy relationships with one another. But not working together is not the way to do so, right? Just think about if you parented, but you parented separately, right? Think about, you have a child or you have children, and you made the decisions about how you were going to parent, and the other person made the decisions about how they were going to parent, and you didn't talk about it, right? Or you did things behind the other parent's back, which this has been done many times before and never works out quite too well, does it? Right? Because your kids will snitch on you. And so those things don't work out. It doesn't work out with money either, right? Or think about if, you kept your religion to yourself, or think about if you kept your, family problems to yourself and didn't talk to your spouse about it, and some of you might, right? But again, it's not the right thing to do. We need to be open books with our spouses. We need to be communicative. And we just need to make sure that everything's on the table and that we work together. I mean, the process of getting married is two becoming one, right? And that doesn't happen when you're boyfriend and girlfriend. That doesn't happen when you've got a partner. It's when you're married. When you're married, two become one, right? And when two become one, those two people need to be doing everything together and need to be on the same track and working together and communicating together towards a common set of goals. And not doing that is going to be to the detriment of your relationship and to the detriment of your long-term financial freedom and financial success. That's not what I want for you, though. And hopefully this episode, if you have some financial infidelities, can convict you to, tell them, right? Tell your spouse what's going on. Or if you're, tempted to do something behind your spouse's back, maybe this can keep you from doing so because this is such a negative thing in your financial life. So I hope this is not you. I hope this is not something that you have going on. But with such a large percentage of people actually admitting that this is something that they do, and that's just those who admitted it, not those who actually did it. You would expect those who actually did it to be higher. I think this was a very relevant topic for today. So hopefully this helps you, and it helps you to build a stronger, more lasting financial relationship with your spouse, not your boyfriend or your girlfriend, your spouse, over a long period of time. So thanks for watching this video. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan. And that's really good supplemental material. So all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions. And you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. So tune in tomorrow as I continue talking about personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.